The morning sun filtered through thin corrugated roofing sheets, casting slanted light beams onto a modest one-room workshop in the heart of Lagos's Makoko slum. A single sewing machine stood in the center of the room like an altar, surrounded by rolls of fabric, worn threads, and hand-sketched designs pinned to the wall. Lillian bent over the machine, fingers guiding fabric with quiet precision. She worked like a machine herself. Fast, focused, faithful. She didn't have time for distractions. Every stitch she pulled was a step toward something bigger. Not for her, but for Kenneth. They had grown up on the same muddy street, childhood friends turned late-night dreamers. Their bond had formed in the middle of poverty's chaos. Lillian, the quiet girl with a measuring tape always draped around her neck, and Kenneth, the boy with second-hand books and eyes full of ambition. Lillian's mother had been a seamstress before her, a strong woman with tired eyes and calloused hands. She had taught Lillian the art of tailoring between meals of gari and fish bones. Even after cancer claimed her life, Lillian had kept the shop alive, as if each stitch was keeping her mother's spirit near. She was barely 19, running the shop alone. But she didn't complain. Not when Kenneth was depending on her. One afternoon, Kenneth stopped by the shop, shirt drenched in sweat, shoes nearly falling apart. "I got in," he said, breathless. "They accepted me. I'm going to Unilag." Lillian screamed and hugged him, her measuring tape flying off her shoulder. But later that night they sat silently outside her shop. The excitement faded. The reality was heavier than celebration. "How are you going to pay for this?" she asked gently. He sighed, shaking his head. "I don't know. My uncle in Abe Okuda said he can't help. My mom's barely making enough." Lillian looked at her sewing machine, then at him. "I'll figure something out," she said. And she did. She took extra jobs, repaired torn uniforms for primary school kids, sewed Ankara blouses until her eyes burned. She ate once a day, sometimes not at all. But when registration opened, she was there beside Kenneth, placing cash on the counter at the admissions office like it didn't cost her blood. When he needed textbooks, she bartered tailoring services for used ones. When he had a class presentation, she made him a neat shirt from leftover white fabric. "You didn't have to," he would say. "But I wanted to," she always replied. Because in her heart, his future was their future. On the days he visited home, she'd prepare a simple meal and wait to hear stories about university life. She listened with awe as he spoke about political science, legal studies, courtroom simulations. "You're going to be a great lawyer, Kenneth," she would say, eyes glowing. "And when you get there, promise me one thing." "What?" he'd ask, smiling. "Don't forget this shop. Don't forget me." He would reach across the table and hold her hand. "I could never forget you, Lillian. You're the reason I'll even get there." And on nights like those, beneath Makoko's flickering lanterns, they'd dream together. Of a wedding, a home far from poverty, and a future where Kenneth would be in courtrooms, and Lillian would own her own fashion house. They made promises. Sweet, naive promises. Sewn into the fabric of hope. Law school was everything Kenneth had hoped for. Bright halls, sharp suits, and endless possibilities. He walked into the university with secondhand books, a borrowed phone, and Lillian's blessing stitched into every piece of clothing he wore. In his pocket was a handwritten note from her that read, "No matter where you go, remember who believed in you first." For a while, he did. He'd call every night, sometimes between lectures, sometimes while walking to class. "Lily," he'd say, using her old nickname, "you won't believe this professor. Man speaks like he owns the Constitution." And she would laugh. She loved his stories. She loved his laugh. She loved him. Back in Makoko, she worked like a woman possessed, tailoring up to 14 hours a day, sometimes skipping food just to send Kenneth 5,000 here, 10,000 there. When he mentioned class dinners, she found ways to sew extra outfits overnight and deliver on time, squeezing money where there was none. When his laptop screen cracked, she sold her mother's old kerosene stove. It's just a stove, she told herself. He needs the laptop more. But as the semesters rolled by, something shifted. Kenneth's voice changed, his messages grew shorter. Calls became rushed, sometimes missed altogether. "Sorry, babe, study group," he'd text. Or, "Lily, I'll call later. Big networking event tonight." And later never came. One Sunday, Lillian surprised him on campus. She'd made jollof rice and turkey, carefully wrapped in foil. She had even sewn him a new white shirt with delicate embroidery on the sleeves. She spotted him from afar before he saw her, standing in a crowd, laughing with two light-skinned girls, their accents polished, their nails shining. He was in a suit, one she had tailored. She waved. "Kenneth!" His face froze. He smiled faintly, walked over, and whispered quickly, "What are you doing here?" "I brought you food," she said, smiling. "And this." She held up the shirt she'd stayed up all night sewing. He looked around nervously, then reached for the bag. "Thanks, but I have guests. I'll call you, okay?" He didn't introduce her. Not to his friends. Not to the girls. Not even to the security guard standing beside the hostel. He just walked back to them, leaving her standing there with stained plastic bags and a heart beginning to crack. After that day, the changes grew louder. He stopped calling, stopped asking about the shop, stopped saying, "I love you." When she tried to visit again, he made excuses. "Law school is hectic, babe. You don't get it. It's just a phase. I'm trying to build a future." But somewhere in between the phases and excuses, Lillian vanished from his life, at least from his new life. Then came his graduation. Lillian had saved for months to buy fabric and sew him a custom-made senator outfit, cream-colored with gold lining. She embroidered his initials inside the collar. KOA. She arrived early, excited. Her dress was simple but neat. Her hands trembled as she walked into the university hall, searching for him among the rows of caps and gowns. When she finally spotted him, her heart leapt, until she saw who stood beside him. A tall, elegant woman in a burgundy gown, laughing at his jokes. Kenneth was smiling differently now, confident, almost cocky. Lillian moved closer. He turned, saw her, and his smile vanished. He gave her a polite nod, like she was an old classmate or a casual stranger. She stepped forward. "Kenneth," he interrupted softly, "can we talk later? I'm with people." Lillian held up the garment bag. "I made this for you." He took it quickly. "Thanks. I'll call you." She stood there. He didn't introduce her. Again, she watched him take pictures with the woman in burgundy, laughing, posing, living. Lillian turned and walked away. That night, as the power flickered off in her shop and the hum of mosquitoes returned, Kenneth showed up unannounced. He stood in the doorway, his face unreadable. "I don't want to waste your time," he said. She sat still, hands in her lap. He continued. "Lillian, I'm grateful for everything you've done, but I've changed. I've grown, and I need someone who fits where I'm going." She blinked. "What are you saying?" He looked away. "You're not wife material, Lillian. You're just a tailor's daughter." The scissors on the table caught the moonlight. Her heart stopped. He turned around, pulled the door open, and left without looking back. Lillian sat there for hours. She didn't cry. Not immediately. She just stared into the darkness, not sure what hurt more. The words, or the years she could never get back. When the tears finally came, they were silent, steady, soul-deep. And in the corner of the room, her sewing machine sat waiting, silent, watching. For days, Lillian didn't touch her sewing machine. The shop felt too quiet, too empty. It smelled of fabric, regret, and all the dreams she had tailored for someone else. She stopped responding to customers. Orders piled up. Clothes sat unfinished. Threads tangled like the knots in her chest. She stayed in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling above her mattress, wondering what she had left. The boy she believed in had become a man she didn't recognize. Worse, he had become one without her. The landlord showed up one morning with a folded slip of paper and a cold stare. "Your rent is 4 months overdue," he said. "You have 2 weeks, or pack your load." The words felt like a kick to the ribs. Outside, neighbors gossiped freely now. N, is it not that Taylor girl that was chasing lawyer boys? She wasted her beauty on one man. No ring, no gain. She should have known her place. Everywhere she turned, whispers. Every time she walked past a group, someone's eyes lingered too long. Even children mocked her sometimes, calling her Taylor Tears. She tried to ignore it, but the damage was already deep. One afternoon, as she sat slumped beside her machine, an elderly woman entered the shop. Slim, wrinkled, wrapped in patterned Iro and Booba, with a face full of stories and silence. "I came to pick up my blouse," she said gently. Lillian nodded, moved slowly to retrieve it, hands still shaking. "You haven't been well," the woman said. Not a question, a knowing statement. Lillian forced a weak smile. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She took her blouse, examined the stitching, and said softly, "You stitched this with tears, but still it's flawless." Lillian looked up, her throat tightening. The woman stepped closer. "My child, don't let a man's rejection close the door God is about to open." That sentence cracked something open in her heart. Then the woman added, as she reached for her purse, "If you could send a man to school with your hands, why can't you do the same for yourself?" Silence. Lillian's breath caught. Those words sat heavy in the room like prophecy. The woman handed her the payment and said one last thing before leaving. "Your pain stitched him a future. Now stitch your own." That night, Lillian didn't cry. She cleaned the shop, rearranged the fabric shelves, took her mother's old measuring tape and kissed it. Then she powered on her sewing machine for the first time in weeks. The first outfit she completed was bold, a bright red gown with daring sleeves. Nothing like the simple style she used to make. She stared at it. It was different, fearless, free. So she made another, then another, and another. Every outfit became a mirror of her rebuilding heart. The next day, she visited a local polytechnic and inquired about part-time law programs. "I want to study law," she told the registrar. The woman looked her up and down, raising a brow. "While running a tailoring business," Lillian nodded. "I sent someone else to law school. I can send myself now." It wasn't easy. By day, she stitched outfits. By night, she read law textbooks under kerosene lamps. Her eyes burned, her fingers ached. Her bank account stayed humble. But for once, her future felt like hers. She turned her shop into a hybrid space, half fashion studio, half reading corner. Clients came and went, noticing her transformation. She didn't laugh as much, but her confidence returned. Slow, steady, undeniable. One client, a young woman who worked in PR, loved a gown Lillian designed and wore it to a high-end event. Pictures hit Instagram. A fashion blog reposted it. Suddenly, messages started pouring in. "Can you replicate this design? Do you take urgent orders? Do you have a catalog?" Lillian's hands trembled as she replied to every DM. Soon her weekends were booked. She began experimenting, mixing traditional fabrics with modern cuts, creating styles that screamed culture and courage. People called her the tailor-lawyer. Some still mocked, but more began to admire. She stitched, she studied, she sold, and slowly she soared. One day, she passed Kenneth's old campus while delivering outfits for a student graduation. She paused at the gates, heart steady. She didn't feel rage or sorrow, just gratitude, painful gratitude. Because everything she was becoming had started with that moment of betrayal. Rejection hadn't ended her life, it had redirected it. She turned away from the gates, head high, fabric bag in one hand, law textbook in the other. She was no longer sewing for a man's future. She was stitching her own destiny. Years had passed. Makoko's tailor girl was now a legend in Lagos. What started as a small corner shop with a rusted sewing machine had evolved into Stitched with Tears, a fashion empire with its own 5-story emporium in Lekki Phase 1. Inside the glass-walled studio, dozens of staff moved like clockwork, sketching, measuring, cutting, sewing. The air buzzed with creativity and whispered reverence. Everyone knew the founder was more than just a businesswoman. She was a story, a symbol, and now a lawyer. Lillian stood on the upper floor of the building, dressed in a flowing white blazer, clipboard in one hand, fabric swatches in the other. Her law certificate sat framed on the wall behind her, right next to a photo of her called to bar, standing in full regalia, with the caption, "For the girl who sent him to school and then schooled herself." She had done both. She had built both. Fashion mogul, lawyer, icon. Despite having over 70 staff, Lillian insisted on personally attending to at least 5 clients a day. It was her ritual, a reminder of where she came from. She treated each customer the same, from senators to street traders. So on a Tuesday morning, when a quiet man in a simple shirt and dark jeans walked into the emporium, the receptionist assumed he was there to pick up someone else's order. "I'd like to speak with the head designer," he said calmly. The receptionist hesitated. "Do you have an appointment, sir?" Before he could answer, Lillian walked past, clipboard still in hand. "It's all right," she said. "Come with me, sir." He followed her up the stairs, curiously studying the creative chaos that filled the space. She ushered him into her personal studio. "What can we do for you?" He extended a hand. "Daniel Gray." She paused. "Gray? Tech?" He smiled. "Yes, but I'm not here for tech. I'm here for a suit." "For yourself?" she asked. "Yes, for my wedding." Lillian's expression stayed neutral, professional. "All right, tell me what you envision." He chuckled. "Honestly, I don't know. I just heard you make magic." He returned for his first fitting the following week and again for a second. Each time he asked more questions about the fabrics, the process, the story behind her designs. And slowly, Lillian began to see past the billionaire exterior. Daniel Gray was kind, observant, humble. But what stunned him wasn't just the gowns or stitches, it was her. One particular afternoon, he arrived early for his appointment and found her attending to a woman wearing faded slippers and holding a plastic bag with old wrappers inside. The receptionist had looked uncomfortable. A few staff glanced disapprovingly. But Lillian? She was kneeling, measuring the woman's hem, smiling warmly, treating her with royal dignity. Daniel stood silently, watching from the stairs. When Lillian noticed him, she didn't rush. She finished pinning the fabric, adjusted the woman's blouse gently, and said, "Come back on Thursday, Mama. Your outfit will be ready." The old woman beamed with gratitude. As she left, Daniel finally stepped in. "You run an empire," he said. "And yet you kneel to serve." Lillian smiled. "Because I remember being invisible once. I swore if I ever rose, I wouldn't forget how it felt to be overlooked." Daniel stared at her, and in that moment, something in him shifted. He had met models, moguls, and influencers, but none like her. Weeks passed. Daniel kept coming, sometimes for fittings, sometimes just to talk. They discussed everything, the fashion world, African business, justice, healing. She told him how she stitched her way through law school. He told her how he built Graytech after being denied a bank loan 5 times. One day, he walked into her studio, holding an envelope. "Another design?" she asked playfully. He handed it to her. Inside was a wedding invite. She glanced at it, heart steady, until she saw the name. Bride, Lillian Ajayi. Groom, Daniel Gray. She looked up, stunned. He smiled. "I want more than a suit. I want you." Before she could respond, he pulled a small thread roll from his pocket. Tucked inside was a custom engagement ring in the shape of a golden needle holding a diamond thread. He knelt down, holding it up. "Will you marry me, Lillian?" Tears welled up in her eyes. Not because of the ring, not because of his status, but because this time, it wasn't pity. It wasn't debt. It was love, pure, earned, deserved. She didn't say yes right away. She touched the ring, then whispered, "Let me design the wedding dress first." Daniel laughed. "Then I'll wait forever." The grand day had arrived. The sky was soft with golden light as the sun kissed Lagos awake. Inside the Elysian Hall, nothing short of a royal affair unfolded. The marble floors sparkled. Velvet chairs stretched into rows like a royal theater. Crystal chandeliers glistened above like stars frozen in admiration. The guests, senators, business tycoons, international designers, and legal icons, all whispered the same thing. The Taylor girl is marrying the king of tech. In the bridal room, Lillian stood before a mirror. Her gown, hand-stitched by herself, was a masterpiece. Smooth silk that danced with the light, detailed with delicate golden thread shaped like tiny needlework vines crawling up the hem. But it wasn't just the gown that shone. She did. Confident, fulfilled, forged through betrayal, and bathed in grace. Meanwhile, somewhere across Lagos, Kenneth paced outside a dilapidated compound, his suit wrinkled, shirt collar torn. He looked nothing like the polished young lawyer Lillian once fed and clothed. His face had aged, his eyes were hollow, and his pockets were empty. Years ago, Kenneth had been flying high. He landed a job in a prestigious firm, all thanks to Lillian's funding. Then he dumped her, calling her a tailor's daughter, and moved on to Amanda, the daughter of a senior advocate. For a while, life looked golden. Designer shoes, high-rise apartments, foreign vacations. But Kenneth's ambition outgrew his ethics. He began laundering money through a client's account. And one day, the EFCC came knocking. Amanda disappeared. Her family denied ever knowing him. Kenneth was jailed for 18 months. No lawyer wanted to represent him. No friend answered his calls. No church visited him. When he got out, he was jobless, friendless, and forgotten, until he saw a billboard. Lillian Ajayi, her face on the cover of Forbes Africa. The caption, "From Tailor to Titan, Nigeria's legal and fashion icon." He couldn't breathe. Now here he was, crashing her wedding, not to sabotage, but because somewhere deep in his pride-shattered soul, he wanted to see her again, even if it meant bleeding inside. The hall was full when he slipped in. He kept his head low, avoiding security. His jacket was mismatched, his shoes dusty. But no one noticed, yet. The music shifted. The crowd stood. And then, she entered. Lillian, arm in arm with her uncle, her smile steady, her posture regal. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Phones snapped. Cameras flashed. But none of that compared to the look on Daniel Gray's face as she walked toward him. It wasn't lust. It wasn't possession. It was reverence. Kenneth blinked back tears. That was supposed to be me. The officiant began the vows. "Daniel, I vow to protect your soul before your body, your peace before your pride. I vow to never forget that you are both a warrior and a woman." Then came Lillian's turn, but just as she opened her mouth, a shadow stepped forward. Kenneth. Whispers spread like fire. The cameras zoomed in. Security moved. But Daniel raised a hand. Everyone held their breath. Kenneth walked, not with arrogance, but with agony. He was shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered to the crowd. I don't mean to interrupt." He turned to Lillian, eyes red. "Please, just 2 minutes, that's all I ask." Daniel stepped forward instinctively, but Lillian raised her hand. "It's all right." She looked at Kenneth, and for the first time in years saw not the man she loved, but the ghost of what she survived. Kenneth's voice cracked. "I lost everything. The job, my dignity. I went to prison. I wanted to hate you, but all I could think in that cell was how much you gave and how I threw it away." He dropped to his knees. "I don't deserve anything. I know. I needed you to see that I know, that I was blind, that I was wrong." The hall was silent. Even the chandeliers seemed to hold their breath. Lillian's voice was calm, but powerful. "Kenneth, I forgave you long ago. Not for you, but for me. I couldn't let bitterness stain the hands that would sow my future." She looked at Daniel, who gave a small, proud nod, then back to Kenneth. "Thank you for leaving. You didn't break me. You revealed me. You walked out so purpose could walk in." Kenneth began to cry. Real tears, real regret. He stood up, wiped his eyes, and whispered, "Thank you." Then he walked out. No chaos, no fighting, just a broken man, swallowed by the crowd. Lillian turned back to the altar. The officiant asked, "Shall we continue?" She nodded, and this time her voice was steady, full of life. "I vow to never shrink myself to be loved. I vow to build, to fight, to love with clarity and purpose. And I vow to never forget who I am." even as I stand beside you." They exchanged rings. A standing ovation erupted. Kenneth, watching from outside, heard the cheer, closed his eyes, and smiled faintly. Maybe this was justice, but also grace. 6 months had passed since the wedding, but the world was still talking. The tailor who became a titan, from betrayal to billionaire bride, legal luminary with a needle. Lillian Ajayi Gray had become a national phenomenon, not just for her story, not just for the elegance of her fashion empire, but for the strength of her spirit. In the heart of Victoria Island, nestled between banks and embassies, stood her multi-level empire, Ajayi Atelier and Chambers, a rare combination of fashion house and private legal firm. The ground floor, all things fabric, glass showcases, embroidery labs, and design rooms where young creatives stitched dreams. The top floor, law offices, where top cases involving intellectual property and fashion law were fiercely defended. She had made it clear, no woman should have to choose between her passion and her power. I will be both the pen and the needle. But beyond the offices, beyond the acclaim, something deeper had bloomed. Legacy. Lillian had created a foundation, Stitched for Tomorrow, a program that trained and funded young girls from broken homes, teaching them fashion design, personal finance, digital skills, and self-worth. Every month, she personally hosted a masterclass. You are not what left you. You are what's left in you. And that's more than enough. Girls who had once contemplated suicide now walked runways in Milan, Paris, and Johannesburg. She was also in demand globally. One week, she was speaking at Harvard on sustainable design. The next, she was hosting a roundtable at the United Nations on economic empowerment for African women. Then came the moment that made the world weep. A TED Talk viewed over 40 million times. From Needle to Nation, How Pain Became My Platform. Standing in a red dress she stitched herself, she looked into the camera and said, "The same hands that fed a man who abandoned me now sign billionaire deals. The same eyes that cried themselves to sleep now read court cases and balance contracts. I'm not a miracle because I became rich. I'm a miracle because I didn't lose my heart." Meanwhile, far away from the lights, Kenneth had changed too. He had entered a government-sponsored rehabilitation program for ex-convicts. He earned a certificate in criminal justice reform. He started visiting prisons, sharing his story with young men behind bars. "There was a time I was loved by someone who saw my future clearer than I did. I threw it away, but her mercy showed me I could still build something from the ashes." The crowd always asked, "Do you still love her?" And he would smile softly. "I don't think I ever truly deserved her love, but I'll always honor it." One afternoon, years after the wedding, Lillian was at Yaba Women's Shelter, personally donating machines and funds. As she was stepping out, she saw a familiar figure helping an old man into a van. It was Kenneth. He looked healthier, older, wiser. Their eyes met. They both paused. For a second, it felt like the years dissolved. He approached, slow, respectful. "Hi," he said softly. She smiled. "Hi." They stood under a tree where light and shadow danced across their faces. "No cameras this time," he joked. She chuckled. "No vows either." They both laughed. A moment of silence. Then Kenneth said, "Thank you for not letting my failure define your life." Lillian replied, "And thank you for not letting your fall become your grave." He nodded. They shook hands. And in that moment, no bitterness, no regret, just closure. That evening, back at home, Daniel walked into the study where Lillian was sketching. She looked up. "We saw each other today." "Who?" "Kenneth." Daniel paused. "How did it feel?" "Like the final thread," she whispered. "Tied and tucked in." He came close, kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you." She smiled. "I'm proud of me too." Outside, the Lagos skyline glittered, and within it, somewhere between law and lace, justice and joy, Lillian Ajayi Gray stitched her legacy into the fabric of the nation. She was no longer the tailor's daughter. She was the queen of threads and thunder. Moral of this story: sometimes rejection is not the end. It's the beginning of redirection. When purpose calls, pain becomes a stepping stone, and when grace leads the way, glory is inevitable.